Ouais, j'ai, mais c'est... Pierre-Louis, ça module là ou pas? Non. Un, deux, un, deux. Un, deux, test.
Testing, testing. Oh, that's better. Testing. Can you hear me at the back? Mamadou, is there an echo? All good? You can hear me? Testing. Hi, tech support. Yeah, thank you. Testing, testing. Testing.
It's okay, you can try it. You can try everything if you want.
Testing. 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 This is just a quick announcement. If you're in the room and you're on the cybersecurity main session panel, if I could ask you to please come up to the podium. We'll be starting promptly at 10. So 2 minutes to 10, I'd expect every panelist to be seated. Thank you. If I could just ask the remote moderators for the cybersecurity main session to please prepare the platform. Thank you. And just let everybody know that we'll be starting in 15 minutes. Is Wim de Gazelle in the room? Just checking to see if Wim, in the best practice forum.
就中文的翻译现在到位了没有？现在中文翻译。Working now？ 中文现在在吗？能听到翻译吗？可以听到了。OK。Channel 6。谢谢。
Channel 6 is in English and is English or Chinese? Sorry, Channel 6 is in Chinese. Spanish? And Spanish is on Channel 2.
Buenos días a todos. ¿Sí escuchan la traducción? Sí, ya dijeron por allá que sí. Entonces, sí.
Channel 1 is for English speakers. Channel 2 is Espanol. Channel 3 is on French. Channel 4 is in Russian. Channel 5 is in Arabic. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We welcome you to this morning's main session on cybersecurity. This is day 2, Tuesday, the 13th of November, and we're in Salle 1, streaming in. First of all, we'd like to welcome all the remote participants who are streaming in from all across the earth, from Latin America, from Africa, from Asia Pacific, from the Caribbean, and from Europe, and the Americas. So we welcome you. As you can imagine, there's translations there's translation available for this particular session. So you'll see little earpieces which you can put on. Some of our speakers will be speaking in different languages. So if you're an English speaker, you can go on to Channel 1, Channel 2 for Spanish, Channel 6 for Chinese. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed, we'd also like to take a minute of silence to remember Stan Green. As you can imagine, he brought a whole lot of marvel into the world. And so for 2 seconds, if we could please, for a minute, if we could have a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you. In case you were wondering, he brought us Marvel, Wakanda, and Spider-Man, and a whole lot of other action animated figures. As you can see, I'm wearing my Spider-Man t-shirt, so you can smile now and relax. Yes, so good morning, everybody. Can you all hear me from the back? So how we'd like to facilitate this main session this morning is to keep the room engaged and to have a dialogue. Rather than the panel talking down to the community, we'd like to engage in a very diverse, animated, and interactive dialogue. And so to start off, let me please introduce the working title, which is Cybersecurity and Privacy Practices that can build trust and ensure growth and prosperity for all. So we're pleased to have a distinguished lot of experts that are currently seated at the podium. And if I could please introduce them. So we have Mr. Seth Bouvier. Mr. Seth Bouvier from the US State Department, if we could please ask you to stand so people can see you. We have Ambassador Longzhu, Coordinator of Cyber Affairs from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in China. We have Ms. Mallory Noddle from Article 19. We have Mr. Christopher Stack from Telefonica, well known to the community. We have Ms. Anna Hibi Becerril, who's with us from Mexico. Oh, and we have Ambassador Martineau, who is known to us. He's our host with the French government. Thank you, Ambassador, for making it this morning. And what's her name? My sincere apologies, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, my name is Ashna Kalamela, and I work with CYBERSECURITY, which is the Collaboration and International ICT Policy for East and Southern Africa. We're based out of Kampala in Uganda.
That really shouldn't have happened, and I respectfully apologize to you for forgetting. My apologies. So with that, we'd like to start off with setting the context of why we're here. As you can imagine, cybersecurity is a critical thematic space. There are lots of threats and vulnerabilities as government begins to collect data, as private sector collects data, as we're all on the internet and we live in a very borderless world and there's a lot of data involved. There are all kinds of issues that emerge in terms of privacy, in terms of security threats. For instance, we have just several months ago, there was an attack on the Ukraine power station, where there was an attack on the industrial control systems. And as governments push towards regulating their cyberspace and implementing strategies in this particular area, there are certain issues that surface in terms of privacy. We see this in Pakistan. Is there anyone from Pakistan in the room? I think Digital Rights Foundation is heavily represented in this year's IGF. We see the harvesting of data that's been abused both in India and Pakistan in recent times. And so with that, we have this distinguished lot of panelists who will be speaking about their country's different cyber strategies for those who are from government, but at the same time to sort of reach out to us in terms of how they deal with some of these dichotomies and some of these tensions. So first, if I could invite Ambassador Martin on to please weigh in for the 2 minutes. Thank you.
So thank you for having me this morning to talk about cybersecurity and data protection, data privacy. So, as President Macron said yesterday, we French government consider that stability in the cyberspace and the fact that stability, sorry, I'm still out of the room in my head. If we want to keep the internet close to its promise at the origin of it, which is openness, universality, liberty, freedom, we need to make it a safe place. We need to make it a place where confrontations are limited, conflicts are limited, where we can find some stability. the difference between the kind of situation we've known for years in the real world, if I can say so, and the current situation in the cyberspace, in the digital space, is that in a way every actor can play a positive and a negative role. It's not only about states confronting themselves. It's about states, it's about private actors, legitimate and illegitimate private actors. It's about new practices that we don't want to see in the cyberspace, like hackback, reverse hacking, which is sort of privatization of war. We don't want the privatization of war. We want states to be in control of of the law. So if we want to reach these goals, by the way, I want to add up another objective, which is the fact that if we want our democracies to work efficiently and transparently, we can't accept interferences during our electoral processes. All these goals have been, in a way, gathered in the so-called Paris Code for Stability that President Macron mentioned yesterday and endorsed officially on behalf of France. These are the goals that we need to reach. And for this, we need the cooperation of states, but we also need the cooperation of every stakeholder. And this is why, by the way, so many companies have endorsed it in the previous days, and we hope in the coming days. This is why so many NGOs have endorsed it. Many more than states, by the way. Even if we have reached a very substantial amount of states endorsing the Paris Code. So the idea basically is to work together to try and understand each other's positions and to engage into a discussion that needs to be fruitful. If we want to reach these goals, we need to invent and work on the necessary cooperative measures that we absolutely need to implement. So that would be my start. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Martinon. If we could call upon Mr. Long Zhu from China, if you'd like to weigh in on your country's cyber strategy. Translation is available. He'll be speaking in Chinese. Thank you, Mr. Zhu.
各位同事，主席女士，各位朋友，很高兴参加本次网络安全、信任与隐私全会。我们正处在一个数字化的时代，信息通讯技术日新月异，数字科技创新不断涌现，网络与人们的生活深度融合，带来巨大的数字红利与机遇。 已经成为驱动世界经济社会发展的新的动能。但是，与此同时，网络空间也给我们带来了前所未有的新的挑战。从世界范围看，网络安全的威胁和风险日益突出，网络侵害个人隐私和知识产权时有发生，网络攻击和网络犯罪大幅增长。 网络恐怖主义，网络恐怖主义成为了全球的公害。网络空间的全球治理严重滞后，对维护网络安全和良好秩序形成了严重的制约。特别是最近一段时间，网络假新闻泛滥，大规模用户数据被泄露和滥用，各方的信任赤字不断扩大。 暴露出网络安全的深层次的风险，面对这些威胁和挑战，我们认为国际社会应该群策群力，努力实现普遍安全和共同繁荣。一呢是要以坚持合作共赢为目标， 网络安全、网络空间互联互通，各国的利益交融休戚与共，必须坚持共商共建、和平合作。中国国家主席习近平提出构建网络空间命运共同体的理念，是针对网络空间特点提出了创造性的应对的思路，目的就是推动各方以同舟共济的精神，共同营造公平公正、更加包容的网络空间。二呢是坚持发展与安全并重，网络安全水平提升与经济发展和能力建设的增强互为基础。一方面，我们要把握发展这把解决安全问题的总钥匙，坚持在发展中促安全，致力于弥合数字鸿沟，解决发展不平衡的问题。另一方面，我们要坚持以安全保发展，既不能为追求绝对安全牺牲发展的活力，也不能以市场自由化、贸易化为基础为由回避必要的安全监管。三呢是以规则为中心，制定各方普遍接受的网络空间国际规则，这是维护网络空间和平稳定、促进互信的关键。第四呢是坚持全方位、多层次的工作模式。经过社会各方面的努力，中国走出了一条有自身特色的互联网治理之路。我待会儿还可以就这个问题进一步阐述我们的看法。谢谢。
Thank you, Mr. Zhou. Thank you. So with that, we'll go to civil society. You'll note that the two representatives from governments, both France and China, sort of mentioned that there's a need for regulation and there's a need for global shared responsibilities. And so before we jump to the US State Department's representative, Mr. Seth Weaver, I thought this would be an opportune time for Ms. Asna Calamera to sort of weigh in terms of CYBERSECURITY or civil society's perspective in relation to the current public policy issue. Thank you. Asna.
Thank you. So I'll speak from a sub-Saharan perspective. We're all aware that the continent's got amongst the fastest growing internet penetration rates. Approximately a quarter of the population are internet users, and it's a huge driver in socio-economic development. Unfortunately, that growth in penetration is being matched by criminal acts against government, private sector, and individual users. We're seeing huge growth in gender-based violence online, in blackmail, extortion, fraud, harassment, and of course the theft of personal data, as well as extremism and hate speech online. These threats are cross-border and committed across jurisdictions, and ultimately they undermine the confidence and trust of use of the internet for the few, the quarter that I've mentioned, that are actually online. There's therefore a need to prioritize policy and practice, as well as legislations that allow for efficient and effective stakeholder cooperation in prevention and repression of these criminal acts online. However, and most importantly, these cybercrime or cybersecurity legislations, if put in place, should not be used to curtail freedom of expression and privacy. I think we've all seen recently in Tanzania where the Cybercrime Act and legislation is used to curtail freedom of expression online and stifle critics. The same is happening in Uganda where the Computer Misuse Act is amongst the tools used by the state to stifle dissent and critics of the state. For users, obviously, safety tools are just as important in securing their communication, so it's critical to enhance use of digital security. So there's a dire need for capacity building around digital security practices amongst users, as well as private sector and government on the continent. Ultimately, of course, for the internet to be the driver that it is for socioeconomic development in Africa, it's important that the policy and practice environment for cybersecurity is cognizant of the challenges that I mentioned earlier on, gender-based violence online, violent extremism, and threat to personal data, but most importantly, that it has human rights safeguards in place, so it's not used like it is in Tanzania and Uganda and other countries where cybercrime legislation is used to stifle freedom of expression and critics online.
Thank you, Ms. Asma. And would like to invite Article 19's Ms. Mallory to weigh in on the issues of privacy and the dichotomies.
Thanks. I think Ashna said most of what I would say, but I would just add that as well, there's a lot of focus in cybersecurity on conflict, as we've heard, that came up, and in other sorts of digital rights issues that are included in cybersecurity that maybe shouldn't be. And it's we see increasing securitization of these conversations, for example, around fake news. So I think that that's one trend that we have to be very clear about, that these are related issues, but they're not at the center. And what is at the center, I think, is not just the risk to infrastructure, the risk to businesses and economies. It really is people, because the reason why we care about the security of infrastructure, for example, in cyber attacks, is because people are at risk. The reason why we care about whether or not businesses and economies are viable and safe is not just because of those businesses existing, it's because of the people, the users, the workers that are involved in these systems. So I think putting people at the center of cybersecurity is a really good approach. It also means that we have a basis for talking about cybersecurity. It was said earlier that we need rules, but we already have a lot of rules. We already have we have criminal codes, we have human rights frameworks. There already are a lot of things that we can cover with what we have already. I think what is important is actually having conversations about cybersecurity that furthers this or that adds something new rather than just a sort of general blanket securitization of everything online. And I think that, again, yeah, when we put people at the center, we can focus on things like freedom of expression and privacy. And indeed, policy doesn't go far enough. And so one way that we can make up for that policy falling behind is through technical standards and technical solutions. So that is a focus of the work that my organization does, along with many others, is to look at technical standards and how the internet is built from the ground up to be privacy respecting and secure for everyone. I do agree with Ashna that there is a lot of digital security training that's needed. At the same time, I think that the changes that we can make, the most impactful ones, will change the internet and make it more secure and safe for everyone. And that can happen at the lower layers in setting technical standards. So policy and technical standards kind of go hand in hand, in my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mallory. If we could move to Seth Bouvier from the US State Department. And the question we have for you, Seth, is what are some of the existing best practices from where you sit, whether legal, regulatory, or voluntary self-regulatory, in cybersecurity and privacy that have enabled trust and facilitated sustainable economic development? By the way, these questions are actually from the community, the global community.
Hi, thank you. Before I answer, I did want to just take a moment to thank you, Salle, and to thank Ben, who's not able to be here. He's in Dubai, I believe, and the MAG and the other organizers for putting this together. It's great to be here. I did just want to pause a moment, and I think the previous speakers have laid out pretty clearly a lot of the threats that are in front of us, and in our own ways, I think everyone up here is trying to confront them. And I did just want to interject the idea that the way that we confront them is important. And this has, I think, been brought up previously as well. But the way we address the threats are important. And the reason is we risk sacrificing a lot of the benefits of the internet. And so as we talk about the threats, I think it's critical that we also talk about the benefits of the internet as well and not lose sight of them. I'm not sure why my mic keeps shutting off. If that's something I'm doing, let me know. Yeah, the benefits, human rights, innovation, growth, I think we all have them, but we need to keep those benefits front and center of our mind as we think about how we're going to confront the problems. And in terms of best practices, to get to the question, one of the practices that's really animated our work from the US side has been the risk of state-on-state conflict. And David mentioned this as well. And in fact, I'd hearken back to yesterday with the President Macron's speech, talking about the linkage between the Armistice Day celebration and Digital Week. And the idea is that as we work in the offline world to prevent conflict, we also need to work in the online world to prevent any conflict there from stemming, sort of spiraling over into conflict in the real world. And so that's what's animated our work on the stability framework. And these are kind of concrete measures. I think we'll probably get to some of them later in the discussion. Concrete measures meant to reduce the risk of activities in the online world resulting in conflict in the offline world. I think maybe I'll leave it there, but because we were talking about national strategies earlier, that was a question from some earlier panelists, I did also just want to make people aware, if they're not already, that last month the White House in the US released our national strategy, and this outlines the steps that the US government is taking to advance an open, interoperable, secure, and reliable cyberspace. It's a comprehensive document and covers a lot of ground, but I did just want to kind of throw in, highlight a couple items in there if that's appropriate. A lot of it's focused in terms of our internal practices, but much of the document as well is focused on the international cooperation that's needed around building capacity of third countries, around promoting human rights and internet freedom, promoting interoperable digital economic practices, and addressing malicious activity. And so those are some key concepts that maybe we can focus on later. Thank you, Salle.
Thank you, Seth. So with that, would like to invite Christopher Stack from Telefonica. And the question we have for you, Chris, is how can cooperation between governments, the private sector, and technical community address concerns about cybersecurity and privacy in a way that doesn't undermine the open, free, and secure internet?
Well, thanks very much, first of all, for inviting us and for being here, representing Telefonica and maybe the wider private sector. I mean, first of all, I think we have to say that cybersecurity is one of these nice issues where I suppose all stakeholders agree. I mean, we all want cybersecurity. It's not one of the confrontational issues. No one in this room would raise their hand and say, I don't want cybersecurity, I don't want to be safe on the internet. I mean, everyone would say yes. So, I mean, that's a good starting point. At the same time, we have to also say that, unfortunately, the internet and the digital ecosystem is quite a complex animal. It's very interconnected. It involves a lot of different layers. If I just one of you opens an app on your mobile phone, I mean, you have the app developer, you have an operating system underlying it, you have hardware in the phone, then it goes to a network, then it goes through some submarine cables, it ends up somewhere in I mean, it is a long value chain, and there are many people involved, many private companies involved who are working in producing these services and the products. So the problem with cybersecurity is that it's only as good as the weakest link in this whole value chain. So, I mean, of course, bad people would always go to the weakest link. So we have to make sure that this whole value chain is really secured. And that's getting more complex by the day because we're moving into an Internet of Things where we will connect a lot of things to the Internet. That means that what we connect will get, the things we connect are getting more universal, cheaper also. So, I mean, there's less money and less margins to include security measures. So, I mean, I just want to picture here and lay out the picture, which is really that things are getting rather more complex than easier. What's the second issue? I think we are not really prepared equally across the world for cybersecurity. In the same way as companies are not equally prepared, we also have countries which are not equally prepared. So we have a big asymmetry across countries, across companies, across the involved actors. So that's the challenges. So what's the approach we could take? I mean, obviously, out of the challenges, we immediately see also the approach. It needs to be a horizontal, a broad approach. I mean, we need to include everyone who can help on that. Just to give you a little kind of piece of information, I mean, 80% of the critical infrastructure in the world is owned by the private sector. So governments, of course, have a huge role to play, but I mean, the business has a big role to play as well, because these are services owned, these are infrastructure owned by the private sector. We also need to have an international effort. It's good that we have national efforts, regional efforts, but in the end, this is an international issue. So we should think more about what can we do really internationally to keep it going. And the approach, I suppose, should be something which includes self-regulation. It includes some form of course, also policies, standards. A very good way of doing something which might be kind of soft law, in the sense that it's included automatically to a certain degree into products. So I think we should have a whole range of approaches to tackle that. And I think we might speak about best practices a little bit later on, so I keep that for later.
Thank you, Christoph. Whilst we're there, I'd like to ask Michael Ilishibo if there are any interventions from the remote participants before we go to the next speaker.
There is none at the moment.
Thank you. So with that, if we could ask Ms. Enehibi, who's a researcher with the Public Center for Research and Innovation in Information Technology in Mexico, to weigh in on the current discussions. Thank you.
Gracias. Hola, buenos días a todos. Voy a hablar en español, me siento más cómodo hablando en español. Muchas gracias por la invitación y muchas gracias por permitirnos estar aquí y compartir estas ideas. Nosotros en México el año pasado lanzamos nuestra Estrategia Nacional de Ciberseguridad. No es que no hubiéramos hecho esfuerzos anteriores, pero esta estrategia y el sentar juntos y coordinarnos para tener estos esfuerzos nos ayudó a tener una mayor perspectiva de qué se estaba haciendo y cómo se estaban involucrando las múltiples partes interesadas. La Estrategia Nacional de Ciberseguridad de México se hizo a través de esto, de un conjunto de múltiples partes interesadas. Incluso se puso a consulta pública para que cualquier persona tuviera ahí la oportunidad de manifestar sus ideas o inquietudes respecto a la situación de ciberseguridad en México. En este sentido, creo que también es muy importante recalcar que la Organización de Estados Americanos a nivel regional ha estado haciendo un esfuerzo muy grande de acompañamiento para diversos países en la región, buscando también generar esta cultura de ciberseguridad y también buscando que los países se encuentren preparados y desarrollando este tipo de documentos. En nuestra experiencia, la estrategia en México se basa en 3 principios. Principio de perspectiva de derechos humanos. Todas las cuestiones que se tengan que implementar en relación a la ciberseguridad de México tienen que seguir esta perspectiva de derechos humanos. También en un enfoque basado en riesgos y la colaboración multistakeholder, y no solo multistakeholder, sino de multidisciplinaria. Entonces, nosotros hemos involucrado dentro de la estrategia estos principios, pero la estrategia es el primer paso. Ahora estamos en el siguiente paso, que es la implementación. Y una de las cuestiones que hemos visto es, nosotros vamos a tener pronto un cambio de gobierno. Es muy importante en los países darle continuidad a los programas. ¿Por qué? Porque no podemos estar cambiando y empezando de cero. Muchas veces en muchos países sucede de que llega un nuevo gobierno, empieza todo de cero y no se le está dando continuidad a cosas que se pudieron hacer bien. Entonces es muy importante analizar que este documento se hizo, insisto, con múltiples partes, no fue un esfuerzo de gobierno, fue un esfuerzo de todos. Se llamó academia, se llamó sector privado, se llamó a sociedad civil. El gobierno solamente fue un ente de coordinación, pero nos permitió a todos hablar y creo que eso se ve reflejado en cómo quedó el documento plasmado.
Thank you, Ms. Enehibi. So with that, I'd like us to go to something that Seth Boivier mentioned, which is state-on-state war. And that brings us to one of the other emerging policy questions that the community sort of raised when we were preparing for this main session. So the question is, and I asked this to Mr. Seth, and then to Ambassador Martinov, and Ambassador and Mr. Longju, what are some considerations for cyber diplomacy in the development of global norms and best practices, whether it's related to states, organizations, and individuals? And how can geopolitical tensions impact global norms, and how can this be mitigated? So you each have 2 minutes.
Thank you. So, well, there's a lot of ways to answer that question. I guess the way I'll start, and we can go from there, is to talk about the diplomatic efforts that we've been involved in for many years at the United Nations. The UN has really been central to these efforts to build consensus on international security concepts. And so we've promoted in the UN and elsewhere, but what we call, we've thought of as a stability framework. So the idea is, you know, we're promoting this framework of stability to prevent state-on-state conflict. And it's really has 3 pillars. One is promoting the agreement that international law applies to state behavior online. The other is promoting certain non-binding norms of state behavior that apply during peacetime. And the third is promoting what we call confidence-building measures. These are kind of concrete measures that states can undertake to promote mutual understanding and you know, prevent conflict. And so a lot of this work has taken place at the UN. Some of it's taken place in other fora. This year at UNGA, we actually had a cyber resolution, to, well, before I get to that, I'll mention the GGE, the Group of Governmental Experts, and this has been a venue that's been very productive since 2009 to build support for this framework. And it's really been a productive and useful platform to talk about these issues because it's consensus-based, it's time-limited, and it's expert-driven. And a lot of attention's been focused on the 2016-2017 round of discussions where there was a failure to find consensus, but of course that doesn't invalidate the existing GG recommendations of the previous report, which were, as I said, groundbreaking. And so to try to keep that momentum and progress going, we tabled a resolution at this year's UNGA First Committee. And it really mirrors the previous consensus resolutions seeking to make progress. This happened last week, and we're pleased with the overwhelming support that the resolution received, and we think that this is going to enable, or we're hopeful anyway, that there'll be a new GGE that will reach consensus and actually expand its ability to consult more broadly during the process. And so that's, I guess I'll leave it there. I mean, that's the diplomatic effort that I would kind of put into the discussion at this stage. Of course, there are many others.
Thank you, Seth. Ambassador Martinov or Mr. Longju.
谢谢主持人。我也想借此机会，介绍一下我们中方对这个问题的看法。维护网络空间的和平、安全、开放、有序，符合国际社会的共同利益，符合联合国所有会员国的共同利益。但是怎么实现这个目标呢？对于网络空间是什么，大家也有不同的解说、解读、解释。在我看来，网络空间与现实空间的确有着跟现实空间不同的特点，但是与此同时呢，网络空间也不是跟现实空间完全隔离的这么一个空间。所以我们在现实空间国际社会普遍尊重 普遍奉行的一些基本的准则，国际关系的准则，主要反映在联合国宪章里面的一些重要原则，应该适用在网络空间。这是我们探讨网络空间全球治理的一个基础。如果没有这个基础的话，我们就全球互联网治理就无从谈起了。但是另外一方面，考虑到网络空间的特点，考虑到互联网技术等各方面的迅速的发展，我们也需要提出创新的思路，来实现互联网的治理。在这过程当中，我们认为应该秉持一种网络共同体的理念，也就是说，要坚持和平发展，互利共赢的这么一个理念。因为在网络空间，各国的利益相互交融，休戚与共，必须坚持共商共建、和平合作。刚才我们美国同事提到的联合国的进程我们中方呢也是在和各方一道，在积极推动联合国启动新的这个信息安全的进程，而且我们认为这个进程应该更具包容性，让更多的国家参与进来，真正实现网络空间的公正的、合理的、长效的治理。谢谢。
Thank you, Mr. Zhou. Ambassador Martin.
Merci. Je voudrais compléter aussi ce qu'ont dit mes collègues Seth et mon collègue Longzhou. Bon, Seth a fait référence aux travaux du groupe des experts gouvernementaux de l'ONU, le GGE, où nous avons tous les trois siégé, et avec Longzhou encore l'année dernière. Je crois vraiment que nous avons fait des très grands progrès ces dernières années au sein de cette instance, qui a bien travaillé, effectivement, sous un certain nombre de conditions que Seth a rappelées. C'était un travail d'experts, avec un calendrier limité et un petit nombre pour parler et pour négocier. Nous avons réussi à faire des... Nous sommes parvenus à des résultats très intéressants, très importants, que Longzhou a rappelé. Notamment que désormais, il est accepté que le droit international s'applique, et que la Charte des Nations Unies s'applique entièrement et complètement au cyberespace. Donc, contrairement à ce qui a été dit un petit peu plus tôt, il n'y a pas eu de nouvelles règles, de nouvelles normes. En revanche, ce sur quoi nous avons également travaillé, et avec succès, c'est à la définition de normes de comportement, et de normes de comportement volontaires pour les États. Des normes qui s'écrivent en anglais « states should » ou « states should not ». Et ce sont des éléments très importants parce que c'est une forme de nouvelle grammaire du cyberespace que nous avons tenté, avec un certain succès, de produire. Aujourd'hui, notre expérience, la situation, est que nous n'avons pas pu, lors du dernier round de négociations en 2017, parvenir à un rapport de consensus. Nous avons passé 4 semaines à travailler très étroitement. Au final, nous n'avons pas pu nous mettre d'accord sur un ensemble de considérations et de délibérations. Donc nous devons continuer à travailler, et Seth a rappelé le contexte actuel à l'ONU, où 2 résolutions ont été acceptées, une présentée par la Fédération de Russie et une autre par les États-Unis d'Amérique, qui, bon, c'est pas une situation optimale d'avoir 2 textes, hein. On aurait préféré n'avoir qu'un seul texte de consensus, néanmoins c'est la situation et nous devons faire avec. À nous de nous organiser pour que ce travail soit productif. Donc nous aurons à nouveau un groupe des experts gouvernementaux qui va continuer à travailler, nous l'espérons, en petit comité, entre experts, pour continuer à travailler sur la clarification du droit international public et sur la définition de nouvelles normes de comportement. Et nous aurons un groupe ouvert, c'est-à-dire un groupe où, au fond, tout membre de l'ONU auquel tout membre de l'ONU peut adhérer, peut participer, et sans deadline, sans date limite pour rendre des travaux. Donc, nous n'y étions pas particulièrement favorables parce que, en général, c'est la recette pour ne pas arriver à un résultat, mais c'est la situation. Et nous allons, en tant que gouvernement français, nous investir dans ces deux enceintes et jouer le jeu et essayer d'atteindre des résultats parce que nous en avons besoin. Mais ce que nous avons également constaté lors du dernier round de négociations, qui s'est donc achevé en 2017, c'est qu'il y avait un certain nombre de sujets nouveaux que nous avions identifiés et pour lesquels il fallait certes une coopération entre États, mais il fallait probablement aller au-delà et essayer de faire entrer dans ce travail de définition de normes, au moins de normes de comportement, d'autres parties prenantes, et en l'occurrence des entreprises, et en l'occurrence très précisément les entreprises qui sont sur le secteur des logiciels, des produits et des services informatiques. Quels sont ces problèmes nouveaux? D'abord, je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, nous voyons se multiplier dans le cyberespace les phénomènes de hackback, reverse hacking, la contre-attaque privée. Je l'ai déjà dit, mais je le répète parce que c'est très important. Nous, en tant que gouvernement français, nous n'en voulons pas. Nous ne voulons pas de la privatisation du law and order. Nous voulons que les États gardent le monopole du maintien de l'ordre dans le cyberespace. Deuxième chose, un sujet sur lequel nous avons déjà élaboré une norme de comportement ces dernières années entre États, mais pour lesquels nous pensons qu'il faut aller beaucoup plus loin, c'est la maîtrise de la prolifération des outils malveillants dans le cyberespace. C'est une question difficile, c'est une question qui pose évidemment celle de la tangibilité de ces outils, de ces pratiques. Néanmoins, nous ne devons pas renoncer à entrer sur ce sujet-là parce que c'est la porte ouverte à des entreprises de déstabilisation dans le monde entier. Et puis, il y a un sujet pour lequel, alors à l'évidence, travailler entre États serait bénéfique, mais nous devons de toute façon travailler avec les industries. C'est le sujet de la définition des responsabilités des acteurs systémiques, des acteurs privés systémiques. Et j'entends par acteurs systémiques toute industrie dont, au fond, la part de marché ou l'emprise sur un certain nombre de marchés, et en particulier, en premier lieu, sur le marché des logiciels, est de nature à influencer l'ensemble du cyberespace. Et nous l'avons vu avec l'affaire WannaCry, nous l'avons vu avec l'affaire NotPetya. Ce qui est sûr, c'est que un certain nombre d'acteurs malveillants, publics et privés, ou privés au service d'acteurs publics, utilisent les défauts des produits informatiques, qu'il s'agisse des logiciels, qu'il s'agisse des devices. Nous le voyons de plus en plus. Nous pensons que si nous voulons limiter l'instabilité dans le cyberespace, il est absolument indispensable de faire en sorte que les produits qui sont mis sur le marché mondial soient plus sécurisés, soient plus sûrs, comportent moins de vulnérabilité. Si nous n'arrivons pas à faire cet effort, et donc si les entreprises elles-mêmes renoncent à mieux définir leurs responsabilités, alors c'est la recette pour une instabilité généralisée. C'est la raison pour laquelle nous devons engager cette conversation, et nous l'avons fait avec un certain nombre d'entreprises qui elles-mêmes sont conscientes de ces enjeux. Nous l'avons vu avec Microsoft, nous l'avons vu avec Siemens, qui a lancé le Tech Accord avec Microsoft, nous l'avons vu avec d'autres entreprises qui ont conscience de leur responsabilité particulière et qui sont prêtes à agir. Et c'est ce que nous entendons faire avec nos partenaires, parce que là encore, nous ne pouvons plus attendre.
Thank you, Ambassador Martinov. So there were several things that were led within the interventions by the three different government representatives from France, China, and the US. Now, one of which we would like to pick up on is a comment earlier by Christophe when he said that 80% of the global infrastructure is actually owned by private sector. And so one of the things that Ambassador Martinov raised was in terms of increasing accountability amongst corporations. And one of the things that he raised, which I'd like to put to the panel, one of the things he sort of raised is, whilst governments and through the government experts that have been negotiating the text, and obviously there are two consensus texts, am I right, Ambassador Martinov? You said there are two consensus texts. Whilst the delicate balance, two texts but no consensus, sorry. Two votes, but no consensus. I hope that's been transcribed, yes. So while that's happening, whilst the delicate balance can be struck here, because governments don't necessarily control the infrastructure, I'm not saying control, but don't necessarily own 80% of that infrastructure, they feel that there's a need to insert some level of accountability mechanisms. And earlier we heard from Ms. Mallory when she was from Article 19, as she was talking about them engaging in standards. And throughout the week we've heard of different workshops and different sessions talking about transparency, particularly in this particular area. And so with that, I'd like to ask Christophe to please weigh in.
Yes, thanks. I think I would like to follow on where Ambassador Martignon stopped, which I think was an excellent reflection. Of course, I mean, I said before that self-regulation is one of the key approaches we also have to take. I mean, due to the fact that business is so relevant in cybersecurity. And I'm happy to say that my company also signed the Tech Accord, for example, where we try to do that and we try to work together. By the way, there are more than 60 companies already, and it's a growing number of leading tech companies in the world who basically agreed to work together to make cyberspace safer. So I think that's a good example of a self-regulation, of an initiative rather, to work on these issues. It is, I mean, there are mainly, I also should say that very openly, companies from the United States and Europe. We haven't seen that as a global initiative yet, and the question would be, why not? You know, I mean, why can that not be expanded? Because actually, as I said before, there's a common interest of making cyberspace safe. That's one approach. There are other approaches. Just to mention, GNI, the Global Network Initiative, is working on privacy and freedom of expression. We also are a member of that initiative, and that's actually a good initiative as well, because we are working also between companies to share experiences and to see what best practices are. There are very thorny issues about access to data by governments, for example, where of course, you know, human rights need to prevail, but we all know that this is always a difficult question, security and privacy, and which kind of right prevails in a certain circumstance. So we share experiences, we try to work together, we try to work with governments to make them also aware of the work we do, and I believe that as a collective we can achieve much more in having a fruitful dialogue there. So I think these are issues. I also have to say that apart from being prepared, apart from being aware of human rights aspects also in cybersecurity, you also have to think about what do we do when things go wrong, because at a certain point of time things go wrong, and WannaCry was mentioned. It was a good example. Suddenly things went really wrong. And again, I can share to you that I think my company, Telefonica, was one of the first which reported that incident and was transparent about the fact that there was something going on which was unusual. And we did that through a system which the European Union established, which I think is also some best practice, which is a system of national reaction centers. So every country in Europe, by common policy in Europe, is obliged to have a national cybersecurity reaction center, and basically we as companies are obliged and have committed to inform these centers when something goes on. So there's a measure of transparency, and then they communicate that immediately to the others, and so there's a kind of process of incidents which then help to react fast. And we used that process when we were hit by WannaCry as well. And actually was very fruitful because you could immediately connect to a lot of people working against this kind of attack. And my company, for example, published later on even help to smaller companies how they can work regarding WannaCry and what they can do about it when they have been affected, and we opened that up to everyone, and it was used by many companies. So basically, you see that there is starting from the point of a common objective of we would like to make things safe. I think we can find a lot of ways to work together between governments and companies, between civil society and companies as well to get there. I think we have a lot of common interest in making that happen, and I think we can find a lot of ways to do that. And we are just experimenting with these different instruments, which are not necessarily only policy making, and there can be standards, as we said before, and other means. But I think it's important to have this this common idea of we are here to do that together.
Thank you, Christoph. Now, before we pose the next question to the civil society speakers who are currently on the panel, to Ms. Asma and to Ms. Anahibi and Ms. Mallory, we'd like to open the floor and ask for questions. If there anybody who'd like to make an intervention. Now, I'd like to ask you to keep it at a minimum of a minute. So, can I see the hands? Sorry, somebody help me? Yes, would you just like to stand so that we can see you? Yes, Adam, please go ahead. Is that Adam? Sorry, my apologies. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Hans Klein. I'm from Georgia Tech and Princeton University. I have a question for Ms. Mallory from Article 19. I'm concerned in this whole big discussion that we're having here at IGF with the President of France giving the speech and all. We're hearing a lot about internet security and the need for government regulations and the dangers that are out there. Just the word danger, danger, danger seems to be omnipresent. And I'm wondering if I'm concerned that this isn't in fact, an approach that leads to greater state intervention and control over the internet and a decline in internet freedom. So I'm concerned that constantly hearing that the internet is dangerous, we need the government to save us, is in fact a way of perhaps scaring us into the arms of the government, if you will. So my question to the panel, but perhaps to Ms. Mallory, because she's probably, I regard her as the most independent person here, what do you think of this? Are we being corralled into the arms of the government, please, or not?
I think you passed your 1 minute. Thank you. Could the rest of those who put their hands up, could you just please raise your hand right up so we can see? Yes. Can I take you, Dr. Yik? Thank you.
Yeah, my question is go to the U.S. government and Chinese government officials. Actually, we heard a recent Bloomberg's news report on the hacks of the infrastructure, which is claimed by Chinese spies. So this is a kind of the infrastructure problems. So my question is, how can we build up the trust if one country accuses other country for like spies or cybersecurity attacked at the infrastructure level? Thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Yik Chen. Yes, can I take the middle speaker before I take the one on my extreme left? Thank you, please. Please introduce yourself, state your name and then your question, and keep it under a minute or your intervention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Ethan Sweet. I'm a Youth at IGF Fellow for the Internet Society. So my question is mainly about what David said about the role of private companies in internet security. Obviously, as we've mentioned, that 80% of global infrastructure is owned by private companies. And a lot of them I've seen seem to shake their responsibility until something terrible happens. So, for example, in the Internet of Things space right now, it appears that security is quite an afterthought. So how do we go about encouraging and pushing companies to not bake in security as an afterthought and to bake it in as a default into their systems? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take 3 more questions. Sorry. Could you just stand up so we can see you? The lighting is not too good. Yes, yeah, right at the back there before the lady in front.
Hello, my name is Michał Woźniak. I work at the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, and I'm responsible for security of a lot of journalists. So I have a question. I'm happy that the phrase WannaCry showed up. I noticed that NSA has a budget 2 orders of magnitude higher than US CERT, which is an interesting statistic. I also noticed that WannaCry used the Eternal Blue exploit that was developed by NSA and then leaked. So my question is to the representative, the honorable representative of the United States. Are you inclined or ready to take responsibility for the WannaCry attack, which was using an exploit developed by the NSA? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll take, yes, could you please stand up? Right, I got you. Can see here.
Voy a hablar en español. Mi nombre es Marianela Balbi, vengo de Venezuela, una organización no gubernamental de defensa de los periodistas. Quisiera una pregunta para el señor Steck. Se ha hablado del equilibrio de tensiones y de cómo resolver conflictos entre actores estatales y no estatales. Venezuela ocupa el puesto 19 en el ranking de Freedom House entre los países con mayores restricciones en libertades en la red. Y mi organización ha estado midiendo conjuntamente con MLab, Laboratorio de Mediciones de Internet, y con UNI, Observatorio Abierto de Interferencia en la Red, y ha descubierto intervenciones graves que afectan la censura, la vigilancia y la manipulación en Internet. Hemos registrado técnicamente...
Your 1 minute's up.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, bloqueos a plataforma, y quisiera ver cómo Telefónica soluciona esos conflictos entre actores del gobierno y...
Excuse me, your 1 minute's up.
Okay.
Could I take another 2, please, before we get the panelists to respond? And I'd like to ask the panelists to feel free to merge their responses. Yes, thank you.
Hi, my name is Muriel Thibierge. I work for communications and systems in cybersecurity. We have in France a lot of cybersecurity associations, and I believe, and my question is to Mr. Martinon, I believe this is a major stakeholder, this community of associations that have insight on the cybersecurity subject, and I would like to know if it's possible, we kind of know our counterparts within Europe, so other cybersecurity associations within Europe and also abroad. Thank you.
Thank you. One last intervention before we bring it back to the panelists. Yes, please, introduce yourself.
Gracias, Arturo Bregaglio de Paraguay. Muy brevemente para el señor Martinón, después del discurso de apertura, la pregunta es si no estamos pasando de la crítica del discurso del odio, del discurso de las noticias falsas, al discurso del temor, de la inseguridad, del peligro en Internet.
Just before we bring it back to the panelists, if I could just ask the Michael and Lishibo if they're remote participants' interventions. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, there's one question, I think from Mokaberi. He's asking, unilateralism and nationalistic policy is against forming any global and democratic and transparent rule-based system in internet governance under UN framework. In reality, we have only one school of internet governance. Does America First School of Internet Governance allows internet of trust and rules-based system formed? What is the meaning of other schools of when there is no democratic and transparent of internet governance model in ICANN under US jurisdiction? The greatest enemy of digital cooperation and internet of trust, in brackets, is digital unilateralism and digital protectionism. With this approach that is clearly reflected in us, National Cyber Strategy 2018, how other countries can trust us, owned and controlled internet. US unitarianism and nationalistic policy will soon lead to internet fragmentation. What must be done?
Is that the only intervention?
Yes, that's the only one so far.
So with that, I'd like to invite Chris to first respond.
Well, I wouldn't respond to all of that, but I will respond to the ones who went to, if I understand, to me and to the private sector. I mean, there was one question about how can we encourage responsibility of the private sector and how can we make that happen. I mean, first of all, I think a lot of companies are aware and are already doing something. I mean, I gave some examples. That's of course not maybe, I mean, there are different intensities of responsibilities of companies who take it more serious than others, maybe who don't see it so much. So a little bit cynical answer to that would be everyone gets responsible when you get hit by cyber attack. I mean, the moment you have experience as a business, if you're big or small, an incident, you will be very much aware that there is a huge risk. I have just read a report saying that the risk of cybersecurity incidents over the next 3 years will go up to something like $7 or $8 trillion. That makes it the biggest risk for business in the world. I mean, there's no bigger risk. It's bigger than whatever illegal drug dealing and so on. I mean, it is an amazing economic risk and therefore also for companies. So I believe that, I mean, the pure fact of these risks will move companies to do something. Of course, governments can help. Of course, civil society can help also to, and I think there are good initiatives around to also have this dialogue to make people aware. But as I said, a lot of people, a lot of companies are already moving. And there was a question about Telefonica and what we do about human rights, if I understand correctly. And basically, I mean, as I said, we are part of GNI. GNI are companies who agreed to defend human rights where they operate. We operate in more than 20 countries in the world, and we have global standards, global politics inside Telefonica, so we are not making differences. We have committed in our business principles to human rights, we defend human rights, and we have these dialogues with civil society on the ground and with governments. Having said that, I mean, of course, it's a long-term process. We cannot change political systems, and we can also not do wonders in short term, but I can tell you that there's a clear commitment from Telefonica and many other international companies to uphold human rights.
Thank you. And if I could ask Seth Bouvet to please respond to the questions that were directed at him.
Sure. I think I had a few that I wanted to respond to. The first in terms of infrastructure vulnerabilities and compromises. I think that's a topic that's of great concern for everyone in this room, you know, governments included. I would say, you know, this is an area of interest and priority for the U.S. government. The additional complication is that there are sometimes reports in the media which may or may not be accurate, and you know, I would suggest if people are interested, they listen to what the U.S. government says about attribution for things, or what we say about what we believe is happening. And I guess I'll just use that as an opportunity to segue to the WannaCry. I think we've been very clear about who's behind that and what that was, who was responsible for that. I don't think there's really any disagreement about that. But I would use this as an opportunity to harken back to what Christoph was talking about, the certs around the world, and the criticality of this particular function. The U.S. has put a lot of time and resources into developing certs around the world so that we can better cooperate around incidents and vulnerabilities. And another piece of this to just highlight is that we've begun using in the last couple of years, using our diplomatic tools to augment the cert-to-cert channel, and using diplomats to approach foreign governments to give a little bit more context, or a little bit, or prioritize certain cert-to-cert communications, so that for truly critical incidents, we can have a sort of quicker, better response. I believe I had one more. There was some reference to America First internet governance. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I would just point whoever asked that question to the National Cyber Strategy that was released by the White House last month. I think if you look at it, you'll see that there's a pretty clear acknowledgement that the threats to the cyberspace are international, come in different forms, and we have to coordinate and collaborate across governments, across sectors, across stakeholders to disrupt them. There's the commitment to the multi-stakeholder model is as strong as ever. and international collaboration is kind of the bedrock of how we have to confront these global challenges. So I wouldn't call into question those principles. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. There were some questions directed at civil society, particularly to Article 19, Ms. Mallory. But before that, I thought it would be a prudent time to pose one of the public policy questions, which is sort of related to that, so that you can also just merge your interventions. So the question is, how should policy-making approach and accommodate the relationship between cybersecurity and privacy? Are the two mutually exclusive? Or, you know, are there tensions between these concepts and are they mutually reinforcing? Are there trade-offs that need to be made between the different elements to help engender trust?
So thanks, Hans, for your question. I really like the theme of the IGF is about trust, and the trust is in the title of this panel, but yet we haven't really talked about it much. And I think that Hans pointed out a really good tension, which is that when we're back to what I said earlier about securitization, if there is all this sort of fear, uncertainty, and doubt that forces all these conversations into one about cybersecurity, then it is really counter to the idea that we have to build trust. So I don't know that they actually work together very well, but I like the attempt at framing this as an issue of trust, and that is sort of what I had prepared to talk about mostly today. And so I can just give you the very short version of what I was going to say, which is that I think that governments and private sector probably have trust between them. They work a lot more closely on these issues, but that leads to some, at times, unfortunate outcomes for people, right, who are left out of it. So again, I'm going back to like, we need to have people at the center. So when governments and private sector work together closely, they mostly focus on things like intellectual property and preserving, you know, economic stability, things like law enforcement agency access and things like that. And a lot of the concerns that people have and human rights are often not a priority in a sort of those two stakeholders working together relationship. Another thing that can sometimes happen is that people are seen as the threats. So in most cybercrime legislation I've read, a lot of cybersecurity strategies, if people are mentioned at all, they're often mentioned as the problem. So either through malice, hackers are a problem, or through incompetence, like people don't know how to use their Internet of Things, it's going to be a huge problem, but the people are the risk, right? Instead of flipping that around and talking about how people are the ones we need to protect, people, like the general population is seen as the unknown and the threat. And then technical expertise can also sometimes be seen as suspect. There's an increasing criminalization of technical expertise. And all of this is to say that I think that really erodes trust. But that's a problem because, you know, who are the ones who place trust in these institutions? It is people. And the institutions are the ones who must be trusted.
Thank you, Ms. Mallory. We just need to rope it back in because we're running short of time.
Sure. I would just like to support what Seth said about multi-stakeholder models and multiple competencies of embeddedness. So there are essentially two sort of models for trust. One is...
Pause. Yeah. Thank you. If I could ask Ms. Anahibi to please weigh in on the current discussions. Thank you.
Gracias. Rápidamente respecto a lo que comentaban sobre cómo compartir la responsabilidad de las empresas, hay legislaciones que obligan a las empresas a tener que notificar, por ejemplo, cuando hay algún data breach. Y por otro lado, hay otras legislaciones que no contemplan ninguna obligación. Entonces, no hay una fórmula perfecta, hay todavía muchas disparidades en cuanto a la regulación. Algunos países sí obligan, otros no. Pero, por ejemplo, en el marco de Naciones Unidas están los principios rectores sobre las empresas y derechos humanos, puesta en marcha de Naciones Unidas para proteger, respetar y remediar, donde justamente se busca que las empresas internacionales se acojan a este marco de respeto de los derechos humanos y participen en ellos. Otra forma en que pueden participar, y ha sucedido como lo mencionaban hace un momento, es el impacto reputacional que puede tener que una empresa haya sido sujeto de un incidente. Muchos de ellos no comparten información justamente porque puede afectar a la reputación. Entonces, dentro de este ecosistema de ciberseguridad, creo que es importante identificar que tenemos responsabilidades distintas, todos los stakeholders, pero complementarias. y a partir de ahí también identificar que lo que estamos buscando son fines comunes. Tanto el gobierno como las empresas, como nosotros como usuarios finales, tenemos nuestra información en el ciberespacio. Los gobiernos han sufrido incidentes, entonces son puntos comunes que tenemos que buscar.
Thank you, Ms. Enahibi. With that, would like to ask Ms. Asna before we go to the government representatives to final remarks.
Thank you. So obviously from a sub-Saharan African civil society perspective, we recognize that the threats are real, they exist, and they undermine privacy and security and trust in use of the internet. The challenge, like I mentioned earlier on, is the use of cybercrime legislation to then curtail freedom of expression and privacy amongst other rights. It's great to hear from the government representatives that there are a lot of efforts underway to ensure, more efforts and commitments from states to uphold human rights while enforcing the law online. In terms of the policy imbalance that you mentioned, I think the challenge for African states is that there's little consultation or participatory policy development. And we've seen that in the case for Tanzania that I mentioned earlier on, the cybercrime law, which is one of the key instruments used to undermine human rights, was passed literally overnight with little consultation or stakeholder participation in its development. So it would be great if states and regional and global bodies are holding some of these states to account in terms of their commitments to international standards. For the private sector, civil society and other actors, again, like I mentioned and has been mentioned earlier on, digital security practices are not that great on the continent, and there's a need to adhere more on those. And something that the representative from the private sector mentioned is that the challenge for most of the actors on the continent is balancing human rights and the other interests. But ultimately, yes, the threats are important, but participatory policy development and holding states to account to international commitments, but also ensuring that any policy and legislations that are passed are participatory and consultative.
Thank you, Ms. Asna. And I believe, Mr. Zhu, you have comments to make before Ambassador Martineau.
谢谢。本届论坛期间有很多讨论是关于multi-stakeholder multidisciplinary 或者说是 self-regulation 或者 strong government regulation or appropriate regulation。在这方面呢，我想介绍一下我们中方的一些看法和一些实践。我刚才提到，经过我们社会各方面的共同努力啊，中国走出了一条我们有自身特色的互联网的治理之路啊。我们有句俗话啊，就是说自己的鞋子是不是合适啊，我们自己最清楚啊。这条互联网治理之路啊，是不是有效，是不是合适啊？我们中国的这个各方面人民啊最清楚啊，我们中国人民也是最有发言权的。事实证明，近年来中国的互联网的产业获得了巨大的发展，这个创新的活力得到了充分的释放啊，极大的惠及了中国的经济发展、社会进步，老百姓从中啊也得到了很多实惠啊。在这过程当中啊，政府的引导不可或缺，但是呢，也离不开企业啊、技术社群、民间社会和公民的参与和贡献。政府并没有控制一切，政府也不可能包揽一切啊。中国改革呢，现在进入了一个新的阶段啊。大众创新，万众创业啊，中国经济才能实现新旧动能的转换啊。企业不仅在技术创新，在这个商业创新方面发挥了关键的作用，在互联网的治理方面也做了积极的贡献。像阿里巴巴等一些 IT 企业，他们签署了这个企业自律的倡议书。参加 IGF 中国的企业技术社群也越来越多，他们参与了会议，同时呢，这个也举行了很多的这个编会 workshop， 为互联网的治理提出他们的贡献，做出他们的贡献。探索永远都在路上，我们希望继续进行这种这个各方面的合作。谢谢。
I think your time's up. My apologies, we're running out of time. I'd like to call upon Ambassador Martinov to give our concluding remarks before I make the last closing statement.
Merci. Je ne pensais pas conclure comme ça parce qu'il y a eu beaucoup de questions qui m'étaient adressées et j'aurais aimé y répondre. Donc je vais conclure de manière plus générale en vous disant ceci. Je suis allé pour la première fois à l'IGF il y a 5 ans. 5 ans après, nous accueillons l'IGF à Paris et je constate toujours la même incroyable méfiance de la société civile à l'égard des États, quel que soit le sujet. Il y a 5 ans, on ne parlait pas de cybersécurité. Aujourd'hui, c'est le sujet principal. Qu'est-ce que j'entends? J'entends, pardon, respectueusement, Mallory nous dire que dans notre réflexion sur la cybersécurité, the people, les gens ne sont pas au centre de notre réflexion. Ah bon? Ben, c'est qui alors? Quand on réfléchit sur la cybercriminalité, c'est bien pour empêcher que les gens se fassent dérober leurs économies en ligne ou se fassent voler leurs data. Quand j'entends notre collègue de Georgia Tech dire que les risques en matière de cybersécurité pourraient avoir pour conséquence qu'on se réfugie dans les bras de l'État. Oui, en effet. Dans mon pays, quand il s'agit de la paix et de la guerre, c'est l'État qui décide. Nous contemplons une situation où l'instabilité dans le cyberespace n'a pas encore produit de victimes, civiles ou militaires. Personne n'est mort de la cyberguerre. Néanmoins, avec WannaCry, combien d'hôpitaux ont été empêchés de fonctionner pendant des heures? Aucune victime n'a été déplorée, officiellement. Quand les principales compagnies de fourniture d'électricité en Ukraine sont empêchées de fonctionner pendant plusieurs jours en plein hiver ukrainien, par chance, il n'y a pas eu de mort. Mais ce que nous devons envisager, c'est qu'il y aura des morts dans l'avenir à cause de la cyberguerre. Et ce jour-là, je peux vous dire qu'en France, mes concitoyens, les électeurs, ne se tourneront pas vers Orange pour demander des comptes à Orange parce qu'Orange ou les réseaux d'Orange auront été attaqués, parce que Orange, effectivement, opère un certain nombre d'infrastructures critiques pour le compte du public. Les Français se tourneront vers le gouvernement et lui demanderont ce qui s'est passé et lui demanderont des comptes. Cette situation ne changera pas. Donc, je vous demande, je vais quitter mon boulot dans 2 jours. Vous ne me verrez plus, vous n'entendrez plus parler de moi, je quitterai la scène numérique. Je vous demande, chacun, de faire effort pour sortir de cet état de méfiance absolue. Je parle pour le gouvernement français. Le gouvernement français est un état de droit depuis plus de 2 siècles et les lois sur la cybersécurité subissent un process démocratique. Il n'est pas question de domination ou quoi que ce soit. Il est question de faire en sorte de sauvegarder le bien commun. Et j'ajoute que depuis hier, le président de la République, encore une fois, a endossé un appel qui est un appel en matière de cybersécurité multi-stakeholder. Donc instaurons un peu de confiance, sinon je vous assure que nous n'irons nulle part.
Thank you, Ambassador Martinov. Ladies and gentlemen, we started off with exploring building trust in the context of cybersecurity, and particularly exploring the dichotomies and the pull and push and the tension between privacy and cybersecurity. And I have the pleasure of announcing that the Best Practice Forum on Cybersecurity, is there any representative of the BPFs here for cybersecurity? Is Wim de Gazelle in the house? Or is Marcus there? Yes, Marcus, could you please just give a 1-minute plug-in of your draft report that's currently available online?
Yes, Marcus Kummer speaking. Yes, we have our Best Practice Forum session tomorrow morning. And I don't have the exact time and room under my hand. I think it's 10-something. Draft report is up, and this session will essentially look at the input we received and conclude then with the report which will go forward to the community as a result of this year's Best Practice Forum. So I hope that many of you who are interested in this issue will join us tomorrow morning for the Best Practice Forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. And the draft report is particularly interesting because it explores the notion that privacy and cybersecurity are not mutually exclusive. So with that, please join me in giving the distinguished panelists and experts a big round of applause. Thank you also to the remote moderator, Michael Ilishibo, to the remote participants who are streaming in from all across the world, the NRIs who participated in inputting into the public policy issues, and the global community who also contributed to the public policy issues that we discussed today. So with that, thank you very much for coming to our session, and that concludes this main session on cybersecurity. If I could ask the panelists to please go up to the front where we'll take a group picture. And we're done.
Thank you to Salle, our marvelous moderator.